Welcome back to A Story to Tell on the campus of Dixie State University. We're glad to have you here. Today we're talking to Dean Cox, who is the Washington County Administrator. Dean, how are you?
Good morning, Ron. I'm excellent. It's a wonderful morning in Dixie when we can get a little bit of our liquid sunshine when we can't get the regular kind.
Well, it's been really good. It rained all night until I started walking this morning. I walk 2 miles every morning. It stopped raining. I walked 2 miles and it started raining again.
Well, you must have had your staff with you.
No, there are two other people that I meet, and I think they were the ones that created the...
I was thinking maybe it was the staff of Moses and you were parting the water.
The woman that walks, she has a staff.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
so she
it
must
for
be
sure.
a daughter of Moses.
That might be.
Tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you came from, where you were born, about your parents.
Lane, I am a native of Dixie. I was born in St. George in 1954. St. George was a wonderful small community that sat on Highway 91, which was through fare from Salt Lake to Los Angeles to Las Vegas. And it was just a small, sleepy little community. Population would have been 5,500 to 6,000 people at that time. St. George was a wonderful place to grow up. My family, my dad was civically involved. He served on the St. George City Council. He ran a business. A lot of old timers might remember it, but it was called Bob's Garage. And back then in St. George, to earn a living, you had to be able to fix or do a lot of different things. And so that was the St. George I grew up in. When I graduated from high school, there was only one high school in St. George, and that was Dixie High. My graduating class was just shy of 300. And the population of St. George was a little under 7,000 at that time. And the population of the entire county was about 14,000. And so in the intervening years, we've seen the population of the county grow by more than tenfold. We've seen the population of the city similarly increase by more than tenfold. And so there's been a lot of change, but there's been a constant through all of that change. And that is that this is a wonderful place to live, work, and raise a family. And that's something that I'm committed to do professionally within my job, is to help ensure that the county is ran and operated in a manner that would be conducive to a quality lifestyle for the residents of the county.
So you run the county?
I'm the equivalent of a city manager. That's what the county administrator does.
And how many residents are there in the county now?
The county has a population of about 150,000. Now we have a considerable snowbird influx, and so it's hard to put a number on that. And a lot of people have second homes down here that may live on the Wasatch Front. But I guess that right now, at this time of year, we're between 150 and 160,000 residents.
What's the biggest problem we face here?
Quality of life. And quality of life is seeing pressures from crime, air quality, transportation gridlock, suitable employment, adequate water, a lot of things I think that we have to deal with and plan and strategize to keep Washington County being at the pinnacle of life in the state of Utah. And I really think it is. Washington County is still a destination place. If you work up north and you work for a large outfit and they've got a presence in St. George, it takes seniority to get that transfer.
This is the place everybody wants to be.
This is the place, it truly is.
Somebody who I interviewed a while back, a couple of times, said that you either live in St. George or you're going to.
There's two kinds of people. And I think that was Mayor MacArthur that championed that statement a lot. There's two kinds of people, those who live in St. George and those who want to.
Well, that's good. What can we do to overcome the things that you just mentioned? The problems, the water, employment, quality of life?
Employment takes an active outreach program. I've been really impressed with the quality of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, dovetailing and working with the Washington County Economic Development people, and they've changed their name, and they're in a bit of an identity crisis right now, and I'm not sure what it's going to end up as. But a lot of people, if you say Washington County, there's 5 Washington counties here in the West.
Only 5?
Colorado, or I mean, they're around, and so St. George. A lot of people, there's only one St. George, and so with our convention and tourism marketing, we've rather to brand that a little bit better, we've just called it the St. George Tourism and Convention Office.
Well, rename the county St. George
Well,
County.
St. George might go for that. But with our economic development, we're recruiting quality firms, and there's a lot of thought that goes into the recruitment strategy that you use. We're not necessarily, from a county perspective, trying to recruit another large retailer into,
those, I guess.
well, but one city gains and another loses with that. We're trying to come up with win-wins, not win-loses. And so with win-wins, we're trying to come up with value-added businesses.
What does that mean?
For example, the glass company, Viricon. They're not competing against anybody here in Washington County, and they're bringing in a product that is less expensive to bring in and more expensive after they've done their glass coating process. A value has been added to their product. Light manufacturing and technology jobs, again, the types of jobs that pay a better wage than your typical service-related industry salary.
What's the typical wage here, you know?
I don't know exactly what it is right now,
differs a little bit.
but I'd say the median wage is $45,000. Would be fairly consistent with the state of Utah's averages. Now, traditionally, Washington County has been a little under the state's average, and the state has traditionally been a little under the federal average. But we're working at finding the kinds of businesses that can bring that average up. Yet I recognize that a skilled, educated workforce that's less expensive than someplace else is more likely to get that plant than someplace where they'd have maybe unionized or higher salaried workers that they'd have to pay to do the same job. So getting us up to making it possible to earn a good living in a great place is a wonderful recipe for success.
What about traffic? There's a lot of traffic here.
Traffic continues to be a problem, and we've been working with UDOT and an engineering firm, Horrocks Engineering, that has done traffic modeling for the area. And with our growth, and our growth right now is still twice the state average, that's one of the issues that we're constantly going to face. We have geographical constraints on the constructions of roads. We've got river that bisects the city, and we've got lava ridges on the east and west side of town. We've got the Habitat Conservation Plan HCP property north of St. George that makes it very difficult to build some of the typical types of beltways that you traditionally see in growing metro areas. And so with our long-range planning, we're trying to identify where those bottlenecks are going to occur and then work proactively in advance to find solutions that will mitigate those traffic restrictions before we actually get into the gridlock situations that can again degrade the quality of life by having to spend more time commuting. More time in vehicles means more pollutant in the air, and so I think that finding good traffic solutions is actually a good environmental win for us if we can make our transportation system work efficiently. And that also includes mass transit as the area grows.
Do we have any mass transit now? I see buses.
We do have a little bit. The city of St. George has ran a bus system that has limited stops and runs, but there are plans to expand that, and they're working, and they've signed into agreements with Ivans. Washington is coming online. There's negotiations currently underway with Hurricane, Laverican, and even Springdale, because Springdale is another really unique situation where a lot of their workers don't actually live in Springdale, but they live in Hurricane and other areas of the county, and they need to commute in, and parking has become almost it's at a crisis level in Springdale. And so if you were to visit that wonderful little community during the tourist season, which is about 9 or 10 months of the year, there's no place to park. And so finding
Well, now Springdale is the little town right outside of Zion.
just
Canyon.
outside of Zion National Park. And so finding a workable transit system that would allow workers to commute in and out would help alleviate some of the parking issues that are being caused by commuting to work.
So not only there's problems here in St. George, but in the hinterlands.
They're working countywide, and of course my position as county administrator is we take a look at countywide
So they
issues.
blame you for all these problems.
As what?
They blame you for all these
Oh,
problems.
no, they don't.
What about water? I hear a lot about water.
Water is a critical issue, I think, that we have to be concerned with. And I've used an example that just as a new couple, they marry, they want to acquire a home of their own. I think the residents of Washington County want to acquire and have stable water supplies. But the new couple has to make sure that whatever home they're looking at acquiring is something that will fit within their budget. That's something I think that we have to make sure that as we're looking at all of our possibilities, that we're looking at the financial impacts as well and making sure that the solutions are within our budgets. Right now, I think that the Lake Powell pipeline that we hear a lot about needs to be continued to be studied so that we can determine what the costs and the availability of the water and the ultimate cost of it. But I think it's quite easy to imagine how expensive it would be to not have water. If our water is rationed, that will have expenses that will come with it as well. Businesses that may want to come and set up shop, as we were talking about economic development, if they don't have water, if they can't find power, the resources that they need to be successful here, they're not going to be able to come. And so as we look at expenses, we have to look at not only what the pipeline would cost or what conservation costs, and by the way, conservation costs money, and you can only conserve a gallon of water one time. But we have to know what all of the costs are to make the proper educated decisions, and that's with and without the pipeline. What would our future look like? But I can tell you this for a certainty, without water, our future is not bright. the story of pipelines in Washington County predates me. During the Depression, the CCC boys hand dug a ditch from Cottonwood on the south side of Pine Valley Mountain to a reservoir north of the old St. George dump that's still there if you want to go look at it.
And where is that? The ditch is still there, or the dump's
The
still
dump, well, the dump is covered up. The reservoir is still there, the old dam, and you can see it, there's no water in it. And later, the ditch lost a lot of water through seepage and lost, bringing it to 14 miles or so that it
They
came
dug a
from Pine
ditch
Valley. They
by
did,
hand?
by hand.
14 miles?
CCC boys. And they put that in a pipeline. And the pipeline ultimately brought that water into St. George, and we enjoyed Pine Valley water brought to us in a pipeline until about 1977. That supplied basically all of the water for the area. Before that, we had springs on each side of the Red Hill. The West Springs is where the Dixie Red Hills Golf Course now is, and the East Springs is across the street from the McDonald's up against the Red Hill there. That was the sole source of drinking water until that pipeline brought new water in. Then in 1972, Gunlock Reservoir was constructed. And later, in the early 90s, a pipeline brought water from wells around the Gunlock Reservoir area into St. George. This is a large, I believe it's a 20-inch pipeline, PVC pipeline that brought water in. Additional wells were drilled in Snow Canyon. And we've always been looking to meet the needs of the future, and it's been generations of people living then who were looking out for the future of their children and grandchildren that made it possible for the area to grow. In the early 1980s, 1982, I remember we had a very controversial issue on the ballot, and that dealt with Quail Lake and constructing the reservoir there. At the time that they added the cost of that up, it was the cost of constructing that was 30% of the assessed value of the entire county. And it went before a vote of the people, and they voted for that. But without Quail Lake, where would, life as we know it right now would not be possible. The water treatment facility at Quail Lake can treat up to 46 million gallons of water a day.
Does it produce that many?
Yeah, absolutely. And in 2003, we constructed Sand Hollow Reservoir. Sand Hollow Reservoir is a unique system because although its surface area is about 45,000 acre-feet of water, it impounds more than twice that amount in the sand below it. And so if you're ever out that way and looking, you'll notice that there's a series of wells that ring around the reservoir, and they actually extract the water out of the aquifer. And plans are underway now to bring additional water from Sand Hollow down into the airport area. And so water is something that we've been constantly concerned with, and we've been developing the resources that we have here within the county, but those resources are finite, and we're nearly there at developing all of the potable water sources in the county. We can do some with conservation, and I advocate that. But I think we've got to absolutely study and keep our options open. And when we have all of the facts and figures, make a wise and educated choice on the pipeline. But right now, I don't see how we can proceed without it.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your career. Where you went to school?
I graduated from this fine university right here, and then I went to BYU. At BYU, I studied chemistry. I met my wife there. We married, came back to St. George. I was involved in, my brother and I bought the business that my dad had. We renamed it Color Land Sales and Service. Also, I picked up what's called back then a broadcast engineering or a first class FCC license, and I had a great love for amateur radio, and so I was heavily involved in the amateur radio community. And that involvement brought me to volunteer for the county as a communications coordinator for the county as a volunteer position. When the Quail Dyke broke in 1989, soon after that, the county commission approached me and asked me if I'd be willing to serve as the county emergency services director. I did that, and I did that for 19 years. I was here when we had the great flood of 2005. I was working for the county when we had the earthquake in 1992. County eventually asked me if I would be the public information officer for the county, and then they asked me if I would serve as a county administrator.
And how long have you been the county administrator?
I've been the county administrator for just shy of 8 years. So my total time with the county is 25 years, and that's not all been full-time. During that whole time, I was operating the family business as well. And so,
what did the family business do?
It was Color Land Sales and Service, and we did finally just sell that 2 years ago. But it was an outdoor power equipment dealership. We sold steel chainsaws and Honda lawnmowers and generators and repaired outdoor power equipment. It's a great little business. But that business involvement, I think, was key to my education, learning how to keep customers happy, keep money coming in, hair and teeth from going out.
How did you meet your wife?
I was in broadcast at BYU. And she was in art. And there was a building that housed both departments, and it was the Clark building. She was standing under the eave of the building watching it rain one day, and I was running into work, and I ran by and said hi and went down the stairs and got clear down to the bottom. I thought, geez, that's a good looking girl up there. I'm going to go back up and check that out a little bit more. And so that's how I met my wife.
Where is she from?
Believe it or not, she's from Vail.
Vail.
And I found out she was from Vail. The first thing that I blurted out of my mouth, what's a girl from Vail doing at BYU? And so I've been making up for that for the last 40 years.
You've been married 40 years. Huh?
Just about. We married in 78, and so it's 38.
38 years. Well, good luck at getting past that.
Yeah.
Tell me about your family.
My wife and I have 4 children. My oldest son is a CPA by trade, and he is a controller for a large Fortune 500 building company in Denver. And I've got a daughter, and he's a graduate of Dixie as well. All of my children graduated from Dixie. He went on to graduate from BYU and also the University of Utah. My oldest daughter she just passed her boards on Monday as a nurse practitioner. And she went through the nursing program here at Dixie, and she works for IHC. I have another daughter who is a school teacher by trade. She lives in Santaquin, and she's right now a stay-at-home mom with young children. And my youngest son, Ed, works for Senator Hatch in Washington, D.C., and his degree is in economics.
You're going to run for the county commission. Tell me about that.
I've had an opportunity in working for the county to learn a lot about how it works, and really, Lane, I feel that I've learned it from the ground up. As I've looked through my career, As the emergency services director, one of the areas of responsibility that I had for many years was search and rescue. And that got me working with some of the finest volunteers that we've got in the county. I also work closely with law enforcement and fire. In fact, we have a region, a 5-county region, and that we did Homeland Security and we collaborated with. I was the chair of that. I've been the chair of Leadership Dixie. I've been the chair of the County Republican Party for many years. I really feel that I have been a good student at learning how things work, and I've always been nominated by my peers to leadership positions, and I feel that I bring an insight and a knowledge to the county commission that would save us a lot of money. And with my institutional knowledge, I think I know why we are where we are, and as we discuss new ideas, we can find the proper balance in finding the right kinds of solutions moving forward that will be respectful of the taxpayers and their hard-earned money, the great people who we have working for us in Washington County, and all of those who come and visit this wonderful county and use it as a place to recreate and see our wonderful scenery. It's a great place to live and work.
We've got 1 minute left. What's your final word?
This is a phenomenal place. Washington County, I know growing up, I thought, when I get growing up, I'm going to go someplace else.
Have you grown up?
I think I'm still in that process. But I've come to realize that this is a phenomenal area and one that I'm totally and completely committed to. Anything that I can do to make this a better place to live and work, that is my goal. And I want to be open and accepting of others and other styles, but I think we can have a great experience together.
Dean, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you,
Lane. It's been a pleasure
Lane.
visiting with you.
Absolutely.
This is Lane Ronno from the campus of Dixie State University. Thanks for being with us on A Story to Tell.